first book is actually one of mine. It's called Porn and Pong: How Grand Theft Auto, Tomb Raider, and Other Sexy Games Changed Our Culture. This is my big head on the back. Again, speaking of birthdays, when I was much younger and I had a lot more hair, but I insisted on wearing the hats. Shout out to my photographer and one of the people that helped make the book happen. And rest in peace to Adam Parfrey, who was the publisher of this book in 2008. This book represents a few different things. The first thing is that it represents the 5 years I spent working on it. And I was still in my 20s when I started working on this book. Ended up coming out in 2008. So when it came out, I was in my very early 30s. And I have distinct memories of the launch party in San Francisco. If you were there, you were there. The stuff I can't talk about, but it was an amazing time. And just having a wonderful experience getting it out. And it being my first major book. The second part of it, it was my first time of actually talking about technology and pop culture in a way that was embellic, I think that's the word, representative of the direction I was going to go later on with Cuddler, which was a startup that I co-founded a handful of years later that me and my two co-founders ended up selling. It connected people for hugs. A lot of the research that I was doing in AI, which I've talked about over the last year or two, you can look it up again on the channel at bringyourworth.tv. When I was talking about that, and I added AI to some of my books with the visuals. Again, they're all available for free on the channel. All the work of that began kind of with this back when this came out in 2008. And if you do the math, I started working on it in 2003. So I started working on it 21 years ago, and it came out again about 16 years ago. The basic premise of the book is this. There is a connection, I called it a historical shorthand, between technology, particularly if we look at video games, and sexuality, particularly in regards to how we connect to each other, intimacy. And the beginning of the modern pornography industry and the beginning of the modern video game industry happened in the same summer of 1973. With Deep Throat, which came out on the Deuce or 42nd back in New York, I want to say in May of 1973. And then on the other coast, closer to where I live in Las Vegas, over in Sunnyvale, California, Northern California, just outside the Bay Area, I believe, or just south of the Bay. I think that'd be South Bay, but over in Sunnyvale. And that was the beginning of Pong, which was the first major video game with the two bars and the dot going in between them where you hit it back and forth like tennis. What I argued is that if we use those, we can actually use them as historical shorthand. And that video games, and to a lesser extent, pornography and technology, could be measured and should be measured in the same way that we use movies, we use books. You think of Shakespeare, Dickens, and so forth. We think of music, obviously, again, back to my guy, Coltrane. We use those as historical shorthand. We use those as markers all the time. What I was trying to do is go and say, okay, these video games at this time, when it came out, were 35 years old, if we go based on Pong. And so we can use this over this period of time to do this historical shorthand and represent the milestones of how we're creating, how we connect with each other. And of course, tying it to sexuality and pornography and intimacy, how we actually communicate with each other as a society. That was the intent. And no one had done that previously. And that's one of the reasons why it took 5 years to write this thing. So when it came out, you can tell the cover. Shout out to Coop. Coop was actually the original artist of this cover. And he did an original drawing that I believe was this. And he has this huge version of it in his loft, and I believe in Los Angeles. I never visited the loft, but my publisher did. He was able to get the cover for us. So again, I'm in debt to both Coop as well as to Adam Parfrey, the late Adam Parfrey of Pharaoh House. Two things ended up happening. The first thing is that it got a lot of acclaim from Published Weekly and other folks are saying, oh, this is the first time that video games are being taken seriously as art, despite the farcical cover. At the same time, it is also banned in different countries. I learned this because people were telling me this. Shout out to Sri Lanka. They're the first one I knew to ban this book. And I'm like, oh, my little book is banned. Okay. So it ended up being this wonderful, wonderful journey with the book. And I'm working with the Museum of Sex. Shout out to Sarah, who's a veteran over there, and other folks who are there now over in New York. And all these different things I was able to do from this book, even despite it being banned in a few different countries. The second part, which actually relates to 2024, is that earlier this year, if you're connected with me on the little bit of social media that I'm on, you might have saw an announcement where I said, hey, I'm actually working with Pharaoh House, and I'm actually going to be doing the long-awaited audiobook myself through Bring Your Worth Publishing. It'll be out soon. The first few chapters are available at bringyourworth.tv. Now, if you've been watching bringyourworth.tv, you notice I have not mentioned it on the live. I've only mentioned it once or twice to people that I know, of course, as well as to like one or two places on social media. A lot of support of it, which I love. A lot of people are waiting for it, which makes me even feel better. 15, 16 years later, I'm like, yes, it's still relevant, particularly now. We're talking about AI and connecting with robots and stuff like that. Kind of that revolution that's been happening. I had the audiobook come out. It's already been recorded. It's being edited as we speak. But the first few chapters are done. Had them live. And then I got a message 2 days later from YouTube saying that the first chapter was too explicit and I was at risk of losing my channel. I got a warning. They're like, you can't do that again, Omi. And so if you actually go on there, then some of it's available, not all of it. And so that ended up putting me back on the drawing board. So the version that you're actually going to be getting at bringyourworth.tv will be semi-censored, not too much censored, but semi-censored. This version is not the version that you're going to get likely later on this year in audiobook form will not be censored. Let's be clear. Speaking of censorship. So essentially, this book has been banned twice. Twice. within two different decades. Right, I think I'm up there with Henry Miller with Tropic of Cancer or something. Like, let's go. So I couldn't be more proud of the book. My thing is that if people don't want you to read a book, sorry, I got all kinds of stuff in my mouth. Back to the tea again at the top of the show. If people don't want you to read a book, the important thing is to ask why. And frankly, I think we're so afraid of intimacy, and it's a guttural, intense thing for us. And so it takes a while for us to be comfortable having that conversation. I'm happy to be the conduit with it. I'll take the arrows. The book is still being cited now. And along with Brenda Brathwaite, shout out to you, Brenda, hope you're doing well over in Ireland, and maybe one other author. We're one of the few authors that have actually tackled video games and have been regularly cited as far as its discussion with intimacy and how we communicate. Proud to be one of those few, and really good stuff. If you want to go ahead and listen to the first chapter of the book that did not get banned, you can listen to it right now. Well, after we talk, listen to it right now at Why Sex and Video Games Matters. It's actually the introduction to the book. So there's just the prelude. It's about 5, 6, 7 minutes. It'll get you a feel as far as the direction that book is going in. And remember, this book was written in 2007, 2008. And so the references in there and the structures in there are based on that period of time. That's something I was really trying to do with the book. And those of you that are familiar with the book or have read it already, understand the vibe with it, where my intention wasn't to have something that just would represent, say, 2025, the year that we have coming up. That was not my intention. I wasn't thinking about the future beyond where things might go. My main thing is almost like a Polaroid, a snapshot of what happened within those 35 years from 1973, when Pong came out and Deep Throat came out, all the way to, when it came out in 2000, the book came out in 2008, that 35-year span. What does it mean? What are these representations? are we going to be able to preserve this history? Unlike other histories, video game history actually isn't preserved as much. And if you do a quick Google search, or if you're familiar with video game history, then you'd understand that. Video games have been, particularly back in day, again, I got the gray hairs. So I was around when Space Invaders came out and all that stuff. Allows arcade games that I played. My kids are 8 and 11. So a lot of the arcade games that I was playing, particularly when my youngest, when I was my youngest age, when I was 8, like they're in the back of my memory somewhere. I was at a place called Aladdin's Castle, which if you were my generation or older and you're into video games, you know what Aladdin's Castle was. And basically it was this chain of arcade halls. And I used to have my birthdays there. Speaking of birthdays, used to have my birthdays there, literally this day, but in previous years, many, many years ago, before they went out of business. They were like an installation at the mall. And there's, I don't know, a fourth, maybe a half of those video games that don't exist anymore. Like they're just in my mind and maybe in the mind of other, middle-aged folks and older who happen to be arcade gamers at the time. But there's no archive for them. There's no place. There's no history as far as being able to go there. Now we have a wonderful pinball and video game history museum here in Las Vegas. I was lucky enough to go with my kids who were in Cub Scouts, which is a fantastic experience. But aside from that, we don't have much. I saw the writing on the wall, and so that's why it was really important, again, to do Porn and Pong. And even with it being banned in some countries, I think it might still be banned in some countries. Again, get it while you can. That's why it was really important to do that, because, again, not a whole lot of other people were doing it. And whatever memories we had of those games, a lot of them aren't on home systems. A lot of them are relatively obscure, but they still matter and they still representative of that time in pop culture. And so the more we do that, the better. Also, a great place to, if you want to learn more about video game history, just to do YouTube, which shout to YouTube, where the amount of things that they're able to show is amazing. There's a couple of channels I've stumbled across. They're not hard to find, so I'm not even going to name them, but shout out to them. And they're showing, arcade games from 1989 or even from 1983, which is closer to when I was my son's age. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember this. And I thought that was like a fever dream. Porn and Pong, hopefully, is part of that legacy. You can listen to the first chapter right now, Why Sex and Video Games Matter. It's only about 7-8 minutes. You listen to it right now, and this link will actually link you to the playlist. So as the audiobook in its censored form, at least on public consumption on bringeworth.tv, as it rolls out in the upcoming weeks, and I do mean weeks, then you'll be able to you'll be the first to know. And of course, you can subscribe right now to Bringeworth TV to learn more about it. So what banned books have you guys been into? Are there certain banned books that you're curious about? I would love to hear in the comments. Let me know what's happening with that. If you want to know more about some of my favorite books and more insight from my birthday last year, you can go to 40 Books to Transform Your Life, a live Q&A. I do give 40 books, and you can't see past my big head. There's a picture of my relatives right there, but see me, but behind me are a lot of my books, a lot of my friends' books, and then more books down there. A lot of them are featured in this list of 40, including, of course, Porn and Pong. You are listening and or watching Bringeworth, as I have gastric issues. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to coach you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise an entrepreneur. Bringeworth TV, almost 400 episodes strong. You can watch it most Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time, or just subscribe for free. And then, turn on notifications. You get a notification when I have a new episode rolling out for you.